wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Àní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, I'm no kwa Osinachi. One man Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, mama Osinachi.
Àní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, I'm no kwa Osinachi. One man Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, mama Osinachi.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer pass, not because I
Hello. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning, Ikenna. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for
Okay.
having me. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to see you.
Me too.
Herizo. Herizo, right? Is not
Yes,
there.
okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Can we see your
Hello.
face? Oh, hi,
Yes,
Herizo.
yes.
How you doing?
Fine, fine.
Okay. I hope you're ready with your presentations. Yeah.
Ah,
Yes,
okay.
yes, I'm
Okay.
ready.
Okay. So, I don't know if we'll be introduced, but then it looked like we have to just go ahead. The fourth speaker, Ade Ibukunoluwa. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Not
Yes.
very clearly, not clearly.
Can you hear me, ma?
Yeah, I can hear you, but not very clear. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me audibly now? It's not time to put
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Is it time for me to present now?
No, not yet time. No,
Okay.
not your
Okay.
turn.
Okay.
Just not your turn yet. We're
Thank you.
gonna yeah, so we're supposed to start at 11 okay, over here this is 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is 4 a.m. in America, and so I don't know, do you want us to start now or should we wait for another 15? What?
So it's
Hello, Ma. We need to wait till 9:15 so other people
Yes,
can join us in the room.
yes. I think
Ma.
that's better. So let's just take time to wait. The moment is in few minutes time we will start. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So our first presenter will be Ikenna. So you just get your slides ready
Okay.
for we'll start in earnest. As soon as it's 4:15, we'll start.
I
So
think
just
that
get ready.
I'm not able to share mine while the other room is sharing as well.
Okay. Who is sharing? Can you go off sharing so that Ikenna can, share.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we can
Yes, we
see
can
it.
see it.
Okay,
Can see
good.
that. So, just to let you know, how many minutes are you expected to present? 15 minutes, right?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, 15 minutes presentation. And then after your presentation, the other person takes over. So questions will come at the end
Okay.
so that we don't have to waste much time, so we can just be on time. And I have a timer to time us, please. I want to plead with us to keep to time, So we're almost there.
I will do my best, but please feel free to cut me off.
Okay, if you say so, but I'm sure you will do your best. You will
Yeah.
do well. Yeah, you will do well. I trust you. I trust you.
Thank you.
You'll be able to do that. So, Herizo, what country are you?
I'm from Madagascar.
Oh, wow, Madagascar. That's
Yes,
interesting. All the way. Wow. So you're welcome.
thanks a lot.
Yeah. So we have two presenters from the room. So the two presenters from the room will be Adesoji, right? And Ibukunlua. Those are the two presenters from the room. And so we have Ikenna and Herizo presenting virtually. So we start now. It's already time. Let me just introduce the first speaker. The first speaker for today will be the first speaker for today will be Ikenna Acholonu. He will be presenting knowledge in the marketplace, racial capitalism, the Black radical tradition, and scholarship for African development. Ikenna is from London School of Economics and Political Science. So, Ikenna, the floor is open.
Thank
And
you.
you can start your presentation now.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. Thank you to everyone in attendance and all my fellow speakers. Just a small correction, it's scholarships in the marketplace, and
Okay.
it's a completely understandable shift because when you see scholarship and we're at an academic conference, people think it's about knowledge production. But really, I'm speaking about this like university scholarships, the financial support that pay for African students to study abroad in the global north, right? So this is scholarships in the marketplace, racial capitalism, the Black radical tradition, and scholarships for African development. I wanted to start by talking about my aims and motivations for doing this research. Um, Essentially, I was focused on interrogating the role that university scholarship programs targeting African students to study abroad in the global north, how they use the narrative of African development, and whether or not this is true, or whether or not this is something that we can connect with this mechanism of the scholarship. I thought it was particularly important because all across the African continent, we hear conversations about migrants, about student migrants who want to study abroad in Nigeria. I know there's the Japa generation, all these controversial conversations about how scholarships and scholarship programs are the best tool for youth, African youth, to leave their homes, but then also contribute to African development. I won't be able to discuss all of those elements today, but I really do want to speak specifically about the experience of travel and study with a scholarship, and a little bit about the history around that happening. I was also, even though this is an academic project that I want to turn into an article, so it's still in the works, and I appreciate feedback. It's also greatly motivated by, I've been working in this higher education sector for over a decade, and I've been working with programs that work to provide access to university to a number of students. But most significantly, I've worked with hundreds of African scholars, and from various countries on the continent. And I've also worked with a number of foundations, universities. So it's not just one scholarship program I've worked with. And so having this kind of experience in my work really motivated me to understand it more academically, because I was seeing the experiences of young people every day. And it was something that was thought-provoking that I wanted to understand more. And I just wanted to share that through the actions of though the actions of the institutions themselves are paramount for understanding scholarships and what they do for African development, my work is really grounded in the experiences of the students. I really wanted to hear their voices and capture what they had to say about their experience, especially because there is a narrative, of course, that goes along that's, oh, these students are so lucky, or these are the future leaders, the future generation for African development. They just need entrepreneurship, and with that leadership, they can change the continent. These are some of the narratives that we hear, and I'm not refuting those things. I do think that there is potential for young people to make a change and for scholarships to be a part of that journey. But I'm trying to complicate this conflation of a single scholarship equaling African development. I think the journey is more complicated, is more challenging for the young people than that, and the pressure and the burden to lift up a nation or lift up a continent is quite daunting for young people, even if they are lucky to have received a scholarship and to experience that ability to study abroad. So what were my research questions? I asked, what do scholarships targeting African nationals to attend universities in the global north do for African development and within African development discourses? What is it actually doing? How is it used? And then how do African youth themselves navigate this competitive process for scholarships and the period within university in the global north? So these programs, they're no longer just financial support. There's a number of programs that have comprehensive values and training, and also messages that they're sending to young people of this is who you need to become. This is what it means to have civic engagement. This is entrepreneurship. This is what leadership is. And so if these programs are feeding these young people with an idea of what it means to be a leader, it's not just financial support to a university. So how do they navigate the competitive process to get in with their applications, the stories that they tell, the challenges that they show themselves overcoming? What are some of these things that are influenced by that. And while they're in university, how do these messages, how does this programming impact their experience in university and after university? My last question, which actually came as I was entering into the research, so I didn't start with this, but as I started hearing more interviews, I wanted to know, well, how is race, ethnicity, and nationality mediated through these university market-based practices around African scholarships and African development? So my methodology, I did in-depth ethnographic interviews with scholarship recipients from 6 different African countries. These countries were selected basically through my connections. So the scholars that I had worked with in the past, I wanted to use scholars that I worked with in the past, so I would have that ethnographic context of where they were coming from, a little bit about their family background. So it wasn't just speaking to any student that had received a scholarship. There is merit to doing that as well, but I wanted to focus more on the day-to-day experiences of these students and not just kind of what was it like to get a scholarship. I also supplemented this with extensive archival work to capture some of the historical data around university scholarships, scholarship programs targeting African youth. And then, yeah, I already said this, it's grounded in the everyday experience. Um, so yeah, and then one thing is I did not focus on concepts of brain drain, brain circulation, student migrancy. These are things that are extensively researched by more qualified people than I. And so I really just wanted to capture this journey from selection to graduation and work and how they navigated that process. So there is a lot to say about, is it African development? If it's brain drain, is it African development or is it brain circulation? Are remittances being used to really develop? All those conversations are valid. That's not what I focused on in my research. And then again, all the names that I'm going to share in this presentation are changed. So these were 3 guiding frameworks I used. The scholarship marketplace is one that I kind of generated from some of the readings that I used, which I'm going to speak about. Talked about racial capitalism and the Black radical tradition, which is really coming from a book from Cedric J. Robinson about Black Marxism. And I used that as a framework after I started hearing some of the interviews. It wasn't the starting framework. After I heard the interviews, I decided to focus on racial capitalism and the Black radical tradition. So what is the scholarship marketplace? We've already had books that talk about universities being a marketplace. The former president of Harvard University, Derek Bach, wrote a book where he talked about its commercialization within the US and how this started in the 1900s, which was essentially now you have student loans. Now it's competitive to get into university. It's not just about providing kind of young people who will be ready for the workforce. It's about competitive hierarchical processes that allow for certain groups of people to study in different areas. And all these universities themselves are competing in this industry to be the best, right? And from the African context, we have Mamdani, who talked about in Scholars in the Marketplace, and he spoke specifically about Makerere in Uganda. And he discussed this process during structural adjustment that led to the privatization and commercialization of that university. He explains how even within the departments, it was competitive to get funding from the institution themselves. The government reduced the amount of funding that was going to universities, and this is an issue that we see across all over the African continent. And again, just speaking about the structural adjustment policies, we originally had professors like Tandika Makandarire talking about the development state, and universities were part of that development state, really helping to change the direction of African nations. After structural adjustment policies, we do see that that's a bit with competition, and now certain universities lose resources universities, private universities begin to proliferate. The departments that are focused on are the ones that produce workers for specific industries. And so the kind of values of universities change and shift. So again, tertiary education became a competitive privilege rather than an active tool for the development state. And so how can we still say that African scholarships are equal to African development? Or can we? That's kind of the question. Racial capitalism. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to breeze through these because I want to get to the actual case studies. Black Marxism and racial capitalism. Essentially, it's something that says that racialisms or kind of identity of race was connected to capitalism since its origins, and now it's moving to present day, and all capitalist practices have kind of racial ideologies connected to them. I'm gonna go Black radical tradition. It's building off of Cedric J. Robinson's work, where he said that globally there was this move to resist kind of racial capitalism, and this was done intentionally, where people were working to fight against slavery and colonialism and racial discrimination overall, but it also was done kind of. It was also stumbled upon because these different forms of resistance sometimes they weren't talking to one another, but they also were able to implement similar tools and teach future generations to resist some of the kind of oppression that was being imposed upon them. So let's talk about some of the case studies. I know we don't have too much time, but these are sections of the interviews. So, what did it feel like to receive the scholarship? I asked Almakar. I was in disbelief. My friend and I had been working on applying to different scholarships in the American Cultural Center for over 3 years. We helped each other with everything, and finally, I got one and would be going to New York. Did you and your friend have any examples of others leaving to university abroad or on scholarships? I don't think I knew anybody who left the country. I knew stories of past leaders that studied abroad, though, to be able to aspire to achieve the same as a similar goal as a previous leader, such as going to school abroad, was amazing. There was a huge gap for me, this random Amilcar who is living in the middle of nowhere, who did not come from anything. It would probably be the most remote thought I could ever think that I would study abroad. Here's another case study, Julius. What gave you the idea to apply to scholarships abroad? That was actually something that was thriving at the time. By that time, the president of Tanzania was trying to open up Tanzania to other countries. That was part of his campaign. Scholarships were part of his campaign. Yes, scholarships abroad for Tanzanian students. That was when a lot of Tanzanian students started abroad, especially like to China, the US, whichever country they were able to go to. Were they typically government scholarships from foundations or businesses? I would say they were from foundations, but it was the government that was publicizing them. So I think these foundations were working on or partnering with the government in some way. Let's move on to Francis. What was your experience like as an African in your university? Was your experience influenced by your racial ethnic identity? Quite frankly, it shaped a lot of what I think about race to that particular year, that period. There was a lot of things happening in St. Louis in the racial front. And I almost felt like even though I'm or in the current space where these things are happening, I was in the wrong school because we could not have very open, transparent conversations about some of these issues. It was a very upsetting time for me because it was also my earliest time in America. It was very revealing and that taught me this is who you are in this country. This is how you are seen. And it's almost like a warning that you need to be careful that you have left Ghana where I didn't even think about race as much. So I'm conscious of time. So I just want to say that I go through 6 different examples of students who are navigating this scholarship marketplace and experiencing race for the first time for some of them. For some of them, they had been taught about Pan-Africanism for many years. For some, the scholarships they had never heard about. For some, the government was promoting these scholarships. And essentially, my conclusion is that racial capitalism can be used as a tool to understand how African scholarships play into these global markets in different ways. It's not always consistent. It's not always leading to development. Sometimes the universities that are proliferating and using diversity narratives to and using these students' stories to make more money and to appeal to donors and to appeal to the industry to get more students who have money to come to the universities. And sometimes they are genuine projects that are connected to development on the ground. And so we need to be more aware of those differences. And then within the scholarships marketplace, it's not an automatic conflation of scholarships equaling development, especially since structural adjustment. African students are hyper visible in these spaces as Black students in the global North. And so they deal with a lot of the racism that Black students from that country experience, but they also have the burden of this African development, which is a vague, kind of unclear expectation of you need to develop your country. And that burden really hurts them, but they merge it and they use it in a way to support themselves and their families. And what needs to happen to understand this more? I think that I want to see, is there potential for some of these new networks that are being formed from these scholarship programs to actually create radical change? Can we learn from the Kwame Nkrumah and the other scholarship recipients of the past who used these as networks that were fighting for independence? Of course, that's an oversimplified way of viewing it, but I'm asking the question, can we find potential and can we find change that would help African development in the future? And thank you.
Well, thank you. That was a beautiful presentation, even though you exceeded with
I'm
2 minutes.
sorry.
But that's fine. That's very interesting. And you are doing a great job, from what you just presented, and very impressive. Thank you, Ikenna.
Thank you.
So we go to the next presenter. Please, if you have question for Ikenna, just hold it yet. After every other presentation, we will look at the questions. The next presenter here will be Adesoji Babalola. He or she, I don't know, will be presenting a presentation entitled Decolonial Representations, Lagos Identity, Youth Subversion, and Urban Futures in Afrobeat Music. Adesoji is from Queen's University. Do we have Adesoji there? Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, so can you take the stage now as we begin to time you?
Do you want to present?
Oh, you need to sit there. No, I can start.
Your time starts now.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi everyone. My name is Adesoji Babalola. I am a PhD candidate in cultural studies at Queen's University, Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And the title of my presentation is The Colonial Representations, Lagos Identity, Youth Subversion, and Urban Futures in Africa. Generally, there are so many works that have been done on Afrobeats and Nigerian hip-hop music. Some of these works are focused on sexism and the politics of equalities. For instance, we have the likes of 2020, Joseph, 2020, Ononuga 2020. And there are also works on Nigerian hip-hop, Afrobeat, that are focused on internet fraud, which we know as Yahoo. And we have scholars like Lazarus, Ade, and Ajayi. And there are other prominent, very important works that actually emphasize resistance and the colonial politics. And we have the likes of Paul Udo, who's a professor in the University of Waterloo in Canada. You also have Christian Bogi, who is also a professor in the US, who have worked on how Afrobeat music or Nigerian hip-hop continue to resist colonial logics. However, marginal attention has been paid to how Afrobeat had to story African urbanity. And you may be wondering, why is this important? Why are we interested in looking at how Afrobeat, tells stories about Lagos, maybe Ibadan, and other prominent cities in Africa? It's important because when we look at the global livability index, this index most times places African cities at the bottom of their ranking, using metrics like livability, lovability, sustainability. I continue to argue that, African cities are sites where you have, worst, life, where it's a site with worst, living. I quite agree that African cities have their challenges, right? But this metrics, as we do know, continue to replicate, continue to reproduce, the colonial days of Africa. Every city has some, challenges. If you go to Toronto, there are so many homeless, people wandering the street. If you go to Vancouver, there are so many drug addicts on the street. So why is African cities generally often ranked at the bottom? Why is the Western media, often, most times, portray only hunger, poverty, corruption, crime, when talking about Africa? And that reminds us about what Chiamanda, says about the danger of a single story, where you don't talk about other possibilities in Africa. All you focus on in Africa is the negativity there. And this negativity, it's not peculiar to Africa. It's everywhere, across the globe. It may shock you to know that the US, China, Russia, and Ukraine, they are ranked, for instance, over Nigeria in terms of cybercrime, right? But Nigeria has been stigmatized as an epicenter of fraud, of Yahoo, of cybercrime. And cybercrime is a global violence. It's a violence across the continent. It's a violence all over the world. It's highly prominent in the US, it's highly prominent in Russia, in China, in Canada. It's difficult for you not to receive text messages from fraudsters, within a week. So, but because of the stigma, that this colonial gaze continue to place on Africa and its urbans, and its people, that's why we are often stereotyped, we are often stigmatized, as people with high tendency, for crime, and our cities as cities, with high level, of unlivability and all that. But they call our cities of necropolitics so far. So it becomes important to investigate or to evaluate or examine, or interrogate how appropriate artists, story African cities, particularly Lagos, in Ibadan and all that, maybe in South Africa, in Kenya. How are appropriate artists talking about, these cities? If these metrics continue to foreground African cities aside that are not livable, aside that are not lovable, aside that are, that are lacking sustainability and co. So my methodology, I'll be drawing largely on, I'll be using digital ethnography, purposive sampling of Afrobeat lyrics, available online, interviews with artists, music, videos online, and my analysis is qualitative. I do largely content analysis of lyrics. My frameworks, I'm drawing on two prominent frameworks. One by Abdul Malik Simon. Abdul Malik wrote a book titled Improvised Lives. This African studies scholars, argues that the global South is often considered a site of uninhabitable. And what does it mean? It means a site of disposability. It's a site where the people are configured by colonial logic as disposable, objects, where it's a site where people are not even considered as people. They are death in life, what actually Mbebe calls it, or Agambe calls it barrenness, where people are seen as living corpses, So, but it's actually that, the uninhabitable is a sort of abjection, of precarity, of hunger. But he argues that it goes beyond these negative narratives, that within these sites, within this negativity, within these problematics, within post-colonial trauma, that there are also what he calls rhythm of endurance, where people improvise, every day to make a living, to bypass the colonial logics, right? And to continue to affirm, their subjectivity so far. So he's saying that this global south, in other words, a site of transformation and new possibilities. They are sites where people continue to settle the infrastructure of post-colonial trauma. So that's why I find it very interesting, because it's not only focusing on the negativity, but it's also focusing on how people generate new possibilities, how people are surviving, how people are navigating or grappling with their problems in this site. So that is rhythm of endurance, what you call rhythm of endurance. And I'm also drawing from Grace Adeni's Ogunyakin idea of Afrofuturistic imaginary. This prominent African studies scholar argues that it's important for us to go beyond Afropolitan imaginary. And what do you mean? If Mbembe in 2007 theorizes Afropolitan imaginary, talking about how we should not just focus on Africa as victim, of slavery and colonialism, we should also be talking about how Africa participates in the worlding process, how Africa continues to participate in the process of globalization, right? That Africa is a participant, right? It's not just a victim. Africa is a participant in the globalization process. In other words, Africa as a continent continues to affirm its existence, its survival, despite its experiences of slavery and colonization. So, but Ogundakin is saying that why it's good to celebrate African participation or linkage with the global process, right? African connections with the global world. Why we can celebrate that? Why it's good to celebrate that? It's important to embrace Afrofuturistic imaginary. In other words, it's important to talk about not just the present of Africa, but to reimagine new possibilities for Africa as a continent, for African people. So that's why I find these two frameworks useful. So I'm arguing that Afrobeat music programs Lagos not just a site of struggle and lack, but also of epistemic articulation, intellectualism, consciousness, decolonization, youth subversive practices, and fluid identity in motion. So I would like to briefly play a song by Olamide titled "I Love Lagos." I love Lagos.
Why you speaking Oyinbo? Oyinbo, you dey Lagos Oyinbo. If I carry you go Ikeja, my guy, you go love Lagos, yo. If I carry you go Badagry, my guy, you go love Lagos, yo. If I carry you go to Lagos Island, you go love Lagos, yo. Ele Jabo, ele Tiko, ele Bajano. Central of Excellence, Lewa, in case you don't know. Bijaye, Nimale, Bijaye, Nibele, Bijaye, Bakaki, Obasumi, Malole. Riding through my city, and now, hustle in my city, and now, made it in my city. God bless my city. Oyinbo, Ekolowa Oyinbo, Oyinbo. Why you speaking Oyinbo? Oyinbo, you dey Lagos Oyinbo. If I carry you go Korodu, my guy, you go love Lagos, yo.
So that's a song by Olamide titled "I Love Lagos," and you can see that Olamide in this song programs or articulate Lagos as a site of excellence, as a site, he argues that he has been to Malaysia, he's been to Berlin, and that, at the end of the day, he comes back to Lagos because Lagos is his city, Lagos is where he began his hustle, Lagos is where he made it. So, in other words, Olamide is programming Lagos here as a site of new possibilities, as a site, that generates that as part of transformation, right? As a site of hope, as a site where people embark on the practice of hope. Hope as a daily practice is enacted the way I'm reading Olamide's lyrics in this song so far. And if we move to for instance, Kis Daniel said, if you don't feel wise for Lagos, you don't feel wise anywhere. You understand. So in this lyric, the way I'm reading this lyric is that Kis Daniel is for branding Lagos here as a site of intellectualism, a site of transformative learning, where a site of consciousness, it's a site where youths continue to deploy their agency to survive, this colonial and post-colonial logic and traumas, right? And you can see, for me, at least I've been around the world a little. I've been to Europe, I've been to North America, I'm in Canada now. But it is not Lagos, it's not anywhere. So, and that is it. I just don't know why. And that's what this artist articulated. So their lyrics, their narratives, their discourses, okay, are bypassing the global livability index of African cities, Lagos and whole, being unlivable, being unlovable, being unsustainable, and so on and so forth. So, and if you also look at Zlatan for brands Lagos as site of tension, contestation, and all that you're going to see the Yahoo, the wire, and all kind of people. We're also going to see people who are legitimately making it, who are doing well, in Lagos. So all these narratives put together, they are narratives that actually, for brand African cities, or put African cities in the positive light, which is different from the Western gaze, the colonial gaze of African urbanity. So in conclusion, I conclude that Afrobeat movement and its political narratives compel us to reimagine Lagos City, and by extension, African urban features, identity, and image, focusing not on negativity, but instead on their articulation of liberation and youth improvised lives. So thank you so much for listening. I would like to thank my professor, Dr. Grace Ogunyaki, who sponsored my trip from Canada to Lagos for this particular conference. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Adesaji. That was awesome. I enjoyed that presentation, and I think later on at the end I will have 1 or 2 questions for you. But that was a good presentation. Thank you for that. So we move to the next presenter, who is Herinzo. Herinzo, I'm going to pronounce your surname, please.
Yes,
Pardon
that's
me.
right. Herinzo.
Yeah. Okay, Herinzo as Andrea Misandra.
Sure.
Okay. So that is
Malagasy name.
Yeah, he will be presenting a title paradigmatic coup and sequestered real identity, settled new identity, and paralyzed formal institution. So Herinzo, you can take the stage now. Your time starts now. So you can start your presentation. Share your slide and start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Just a moment. Okay, as my topic talk about the strand phenomenon, which happened in Madagascar. Why? Because, excuse me?
You can't see your slide. It's not showing.
It's not showing.
Yes, click on it so you can show. Yeah.
Like that?
We can't see it. Okay, yeah, it's showing now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's okay. So you can go
Okay.
on, go on. Yeah.
Okay, as I said, Madagascar has a strange, there is a strange phenomenon in Madagascar. The country is wealthy, but the people is very poor. I know that maybe there are some African country which are in the same situation as Madagascar. And that's why I'd like to study this country. This is amazing because 47% of the population of the capital of Madagascar suffer of mental disorders. And the leaders and led are all blocked. The central problem is then the sustainable development goals are unmet. There is a lack of innovating strategy. It is not anymore a question of development plan, of a governance plan, according to my research, but a question of cognition program. So I approach the problem not politically, not economically, not socially, but cognitively. In this case, my problematic is how do the processes of governing cognitive structures overflow manifest in individuals, and what are the cognitive and pragmatic implications of this overflow. And to study this and to resolve this situation, I launched one hypothesis. My hypothesis is the paradigm changes following a governing cognitive structure overflow. I mean by governing cognitive structure, the concept, the theories, the values, the central beliefs, and the led cognitive structures, that is the opposite of these strong cognitive structures, ideas, methods, hypotheses. Excuse me. So my methodology is based on socio-constructivism. So I study the case of Madagascar during the colonization. That's what I mean then, before and after the colonization. I study the concept of paradigmatic coup through text study, historical and social context analysis, and cognitive analysis. In this case, I took many variables, such as the change indicators, the belief and values, perception of self and the world through our thought patterns, different behavior and actions, emotional and attitudinal reactions, social networks, and interaction. And I study this through the process, and then I will study also all these indicators from the new cognitive structure weight, which are then given by the colonizers. And as a result, when I took the text study and historical and social context analysis and the cognitive analysis, through this process that we see initial states, content and process, cognitive conflicts and final states, we see that there is a change of the cognitive program in the process, and the belief and the value changes, the perception of self changes, and the scheme or the thought patterns change also. In this case, when we study these this data, we see that the colonizer governing cognition structure, when they launched in Madagascar a new cognitive element, they were very wavy. And when we compare then the weight of the ancient cognitive element to the new cognitive element, we see that Malagasy people follow reluctantly colonizer thought, and the cognitive bias and heuristic weakness are heightened to gain weight in order to lose power and influence. And that's not the same for the cognitive bias and heuristic from the colonizer. For them, it becomes more and more powerful. And in this case, we see the cognition procedure change in the thought of Malagasy people, and the former institutions are paralyzed. The new institutions are settled here in Madagascar during the colonization, the cultural institution, education institution, financial institution. There was also evangelization, and all these institutions give legitimation to the new cognitive structures. As we know, Jean Piaget, Vygotsky, Kuhn, and Brunner talk about cognitive development. But when we show it in a kind of image like this, we can see that from the initial state, their study talks about the zone of proximal development, the discovery learning, the process of scheme accommodation, that is paradigm shift. And as a result, they have understanding construction, effective understanding, knowledge and skills, scientific way of thinking. So for them, this is really a process of intelligence growth. But very sad for the negative paradigm shift for the Malagasy people during the colonization. And then I think the situation is also the same in some African countries. There was a paralyzed former institution, strengthened new institutions, and there's stick and carrots. And that's why we talk about paradigm coup, because the process is really a process of mental trouble growth. And at the end, there is a cultural hybridization and alienation, cultural identity loss, cognitive conflict, frustration and hunger, mental trouble, and reluctant acceptation. As conclusion, we try to answer the question at the beginning, and we find that, of course, yes, by cognitive structure management, we can get results. But there are two kinds of results, the paradigm shift and the paradigm coup. So it's up to the scientists to study deeply what can we do through, and in this case of paradigm coup. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Herizo, for your presentation. Quite interesting. It's good to know what is happening around the world. Thank you. So we have questions after the last presenter. Then we'll look at questions. So we'll go to the next presenter, who is Oluwa from Lagos State University. She will be presenting a title, "The Destruction of the African Family Values." The destruction of the African family values, implication for good leadership in Nigeria. So Oluwa, are you ready? Okay, let's see your slide. Okay. Okay, so are you ready now?
Yes, ma'am. I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, so your time starts now. Take the stage.
All right, thank you very much. Family is the backbone for socioeconomic development and the fundamental platform for developing leadership skills anywhere in the world, but with particular focus on Nigeria. So you see that any nation wherein they have a developed nation building structure, you see that the family is protected and the family is where every leader comes from or stems from, since it's the smallest unit and the oldest institution in the society. Unfortunately, the African family values and patterns over the years have been steadily eroded as a result of modernization and liberalism, which is also facilitated by urbanization. And so because of this growing globalization, individualism, and industrialization, it has speedily transformed the family structure into something that was usually a socially collective unit into something that is now is totally being destroyed and gradually eliminated in our social system. Now, there have been several functions of the African family that facilitated good leadership in Nigeria. One of which is socialization. Before the erosion of the African family values, every individual's point of interaction was the family, where leadership, policy making, conflict resolution, administration, accountability, responsibilities, and consequences were learned. In this kind of structure, the mother served as the first teacher of life values, the distributor and manager of resources, the nurturer, and the teacher of culture and ethical values, while the father served as the coach and enforced actions and consequences. And all of this in totality ensured that there was there was responsibility for every member of the family, wherein people respected the law. There was ethical values, and there was also a platform where children could learn discipline and how to govern society right from the family. Secondly, it provided a place for emotional support. One of the privileges of the African family is that you see that the family members are there for you during the challenging moments of your life. And this created emotional resilience and some level of emotional intelligence, because people come around to rally around you and give you emotional support, which also contributed to good communication skills and the strength to deal with mental issues. He also created a place for moral guidance, as well as religious guidance, fairness, justice, equity, and worship, collective team worship, as well as economic responsibility. In the African family setting, you see that when one person becomes financially successful, he or she becomes like a pillar of support, wherein he pulls other people, all of his siblings up. The idea was to help everybody learn collective responsibility, collective financial responsibility, wherein your financial success is everybody's success. So we don't just rise up, you also pull other people up. And this created team leadership, this created collective economic support for everybody. There was nothing like individualism. Someone's success was not a personal success, it was more like everybody's success in the family. Unfortunately, there have been some reasons for the destruction of the African family values, one of which is the decline in parental authority. So due to the growing rate of civilization, urbanization, and weak economy, there has been situations where children travel as at a young age to get educated, and in the course of getting educated, they find jobs in their host cities or host countries, and then they pick up foreign values or foreign lifestyle, which is completely Jesus. Okay, can they hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, so where they pick up okay, no problem. Okay, so they pick up they pick up wrong values, which are alien to the Nigerian social environment and the cultural environment. So another reason for because they don't see family as a place for love, comfort, and social inclusion. They see it gets them uncomfortable with the ideas of marriage because they see it as a place where they are subjugated, where they are silenced, where their voices are not heard, where they don't feel loved or respected. And then there's another factor, which is the absence of strong public opinion against the destruction of African family values. So in a society where the public outcry against domestic violence, child defilement, child labor, illiteracy, incest, and other vices are rampant and rife, it erodes family values, where victims become mentally and emotionally traumatized and become turned off with the idea of marriage, which also destroys the family structure. And then the last, which is the prolonged stay of military in government. At the beginning of the military rule in 1966, the leaders at the federal and state levels were rational decision makers. Each succeeding regime, however, built on and enlarged the worst characteristics of its predecessors. However, with the institution of the military appointed sole administrators from the civil service, impunity, corruption, violence, and lawlessness became institutionalized at the very top of the grassroots, which unfortunately infiltrated into families and by extension, the family values and culture. And so children of this generation downwards were socialized into an environment where they were constantly exposed to militancy, state-sponsored violence, civil unrest, which they subconsciously imbibed and which was passed down to the family structure. The theoretical framework adopted for this study is the change theory. And this theory explains that every human society is subject to change, just as man is naturally subjected to change. And so because Africa or Nigeria is in a state where they are constantly trying to become better, they are constantly trying to get modernized, to build just like other capitalist states, it inevitably affects the family, because any society that experiences change or wants to be like the West will naturally change, which will also affect the family, wherein the capitalist societies that they are copying will infiltrate into the family. And you know, the capitalism is antithetical to family values, because the capitalism principles propagate individualism, but the family values, especially the African family values, is more of a collective thing, is more of a collective structure. So when people are more individualistic, it tends to affect the family values. So however, this theory explains that because of the capitalist individualist principle and feature that the Nigerian society is trying to copy, it is affecting the family, where you see that the family is not as it used to be before. And so the methodology that was adopted is a documentary method, wherein relevant textbooks and academic journals were employed, and it was used by applying the qualitative descriptive technique. Now, I hope I'm not okay. So to the essence of the paper now, the family is the smallest unit of political and administrative sphere, where many of the maladies of public administration that includes corruption, maladministration, environmental degradation, gender discrimination, lack of conflict management, and leadership crisis manifest most severely. You know, before the advent of liberalism, the family was a platform or an avenue where people learned to manage their emotions, dealt with conflict resolution, built leadership structure, particularly from the grassroots. So you see that the prevailing or rising insecurity, genocide, militancy, political fanaticism, ethnic hatred, political crisis, electoral violence, discouragement of foreign and domestic investment, retardation of national unity, slow pace of national development are all a consequences of the destruction of the family values, because the family where leadership, conflict resolution, emotional support were to be given have completely been annihilated. Again, another consequence of the destruction of the African family values is the untold damage to Nigeria's international image, wherein the family that is supposed to create behavioral, positive and healthy behavioral patterns are being destroyed. And the younger ones are exposed to negative culture, exposed to negative vices on the internet, and they are socialized into an environment where moral decadence, crime, violence is on the high in music, in entertainment, and in the social life. So in conclusion, the foundation upon which any nation stands is the family, while the determinants of any developed society or its destruction also rest on the family structure. That is why the family needs to be rescued, because it is highly important, because it reveals that no matter the policy, no matter how beautiful, no matter how workable or realistic any policy from government is, if the family is not rescued, it will keep thwarting its policies and making it look inefficient. Thank you very much.
We seem to we lost her again at a point.
Okay, this is 10:15. 10:15 a.m.
Okay, can you conclude? Have you concluded?
Okay, yes, I finished, ma'am. Okay, yes, I finished, ma'am.
Okay, we didn't hear the last part of it. We didn't hear the last. Can you go back to your conclusion, please? Yeah.
Oh, she didn't hear me.
No.
Did she hear me? Did she hear me? No, I didn't hear your conclusion. So she said you should give us. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. So in conclusion, like I said earlier, no matter how beautiful any national policy is, once the family structure is infiltrated or is destroyed, it renders the policy and it renders every structure put in place to ensure national development redundant, because it is from the family that good leaders, good administrators, policymakers, and people that will hold the system together stem from. So to make it's just like trying to make a dish. No matter how expensive the foodstuffs are, no matter how much effort you put in making the meal delicious, if the pot and the environment used in cooking the food is not right, it will destroy everything that you've made or prepared. Thank you, ma.
Thank you, Ibuku. That was awesome. Thank you for that beautiful presentation.
Thank you, ma.
But we are fine. Thank you, everyone, for presenting. So we go to question. Does anyone have over?
No problem. I won't join. So that's okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you, ma. Okay, well done.
Hello, over there. Adesoji, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, ma.
Can you? Okay.
Yes, I
Yes,
can
I
hear
can
you.
hear you, ma.
Thank. So, do we have questions for anybody before I ask my question? Okay. It was a beautiful. You've all done well. And the first person to respond to this question is Ikenna, and very interesting presentation and title. And the question I wanted to ask, or I'm asking now, is what advice would you do you have for the youth young for getting this scholarship?
Yeah, I think that was that came up in my research a number of times about what are these scholarships looking for?
Mm.
Challenge is it's very highly selective, so you have hundreds and hundreds of people applying to these. But I find that's full are the ones that are able to tell their own personal story. Organization will say, we want entrepreneurial leaders. We want development.
Yeah.
If there's a way for young people to shape their narrative, even in just using the words that are used in application.
Yeah. Okay.
So for you, using that different than saying I wanted to my neighborhood.
Wow.
Yeah, I know you guys missed what I was saying, but I was just saying, even sometimes using the words that are used in these applications helps. So there was a story of a young man who used to throw water to different ones of his neighbors, and they would give him small monies to help after that. I said, instead of saying that that's the story, you have to say, I started a business when I was young, selling water to different areas.
Oh, yes.
Entrepreneur. You know, saying these narratives, these words seem to appeal to
yeah, that's
some
right.
of these scholarship programs.
Thank you. Awesome. So another I would like to add that if you try once and you don't get it, you try again. And you keep trying. And that resilience pays off, because I am an example of that, and even though I came as a postdoc to the United States, it wasn't easy at the beginning. And Ibuku, are you there? So yeah. I'm sure you are interested in that, and that will. So it wasn't easy, As a matter of fact, I had 4 attempts, four attempts before I finally got to I was able to get this one, the one I got here, which is the President Postdoctoral Program, and it was my fourth. Now the first one rejection, the second one rejection. The first one was Cambridge. I was rejected. The second one was Texas Austin, rejection. The third one was Harlan Sheffield, also rejected. But then the fourth one, the Pennsylvania State University, was successful. So usually I encourage scholars, especially those who want to do their, who is applying for scholarship or fellowships, to keep doing it, keep at it, don't give up. Definitely, as you keep doing it, it will work out. One at least, you'll be able to get one of them. And what happens is, I wanted to also add this, you build experience, you build experience as you start. And that was what happened to me. I didn't get it at the first time, so it prepared me for the second, for the third, and for the last one. So I think that will help. So thank you, Ikenna, for responding
No, thank you
very
for the
well to
question.
that. Yes. So the next question will go to Adesoji. Okay, I also enjoyed your presentation. So my question is, why do you think Nigeria has been stigmatized, or is being stigmatized? I think we have other countries around, but why do you think there's this focusing on the negatives, narratives? Why do you think that is happening? Are there reasons? And what advice would you give? What will you say to Nigerians and maybe to other people who are listening? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ma, for that wonderful question. Yeah, I think I will start by saying first is it's about the colonial gaze of Africa. That's number one. This colonial mindset, that African people are not even real human beings. If you read Fanon and all that, and they are subhuman, subhuman beings. So, and no matter what we do there, we fall within that colonial gaze. That's number one. Number two is also about the stories that Nigerians themselves, tell these white people when they go abroad. From my experience, I tend to tell my colleagues, that we need to continue to project Nigeria, in a positive light, in a positive image. When I share stories, about Nigeria with my supervisor, who is the white woman in Canada, I don't overdwell on the negativity. I dwell on the positive side, on how we improvise. I share stories of how people, for instance, the Igbo, apprenticeship system, how it's working for them, how they are thriving through entrepreneurship, which is not the formal way of education. It's an informal way. For me, I feel it's even Igbo indigenous, right? I call it that because my research in Canada is on indigenous hip hop. I call it indigenous hip hop in Nigeria and Canada. So it's more of a comparative. I'm talking about what Fino, Olamide, Dagrin, how they rap in the local languages, how they program local cultures, and then compare with what the indigenous people in Canada, they are local artists, how they are also resisting colonial violence. So I think it's important for us to share good stories of where we come from. We tell good stories about how we are, overcome. There are problems everywhere. When I walk downtown Toronto, I'm always
I walk like as if I'm in Lagos, checking my pocket and ensuring that everything is all right, that no homeless person is about to stab me and all that. So, but we don't see all those things in the media. What we see is, those positive images and all that. So I think it's also about us, what we tell, what we share, the stories we tell. We at times because we want to get, like Nkena was saying about, telling stories, yes. But at times, because we want to get these scholarships, we tend to focus more on how the government is brutalizing us and how this is that, and that's what's winning ground. I understand it wins ground a lot, right? When you dwell on negativity, I don't know why the world is so fascinated with negative stories, or how the world romanticizes negative stories. I don't know why, but that's what is selling. That's what is, when you talk about genocide, for instance, of the Biafran people, they are interested. When you talk about cybercrime, Yahoo, they are interested. When you talk about how the government policies are actually killing poor people, incarcerating them, and all that, they are interested in all those negative stories. But I feel that there are also positive things that are happening on the continent that we need to articulate ourselves, by ourselves, to share the stories, to this people. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you did very well. So you did. So I usually say, be the change that you want to talk, rather than talking, walk the talk. Like, let them see the good Nigeria in you, right? And then when they see the good Nigeria in you, I'm sure their perspective will kind of shift. They will have when they are talking, they will say, but we still have good people, and you'll be referred to. So thank you for that. Ibuku, you have a question, right? Okay, go on.
I want to reiterate his points. I have a contribution to Yes, I realize that in journalism or in the media, they say good news is no news, but negative sells. So the more you emphasize on the negatives, you tend to your paper tends to sell more. And I noticed that that's what they usually pay more attention to. Because if you say, for example, if you say the government has created more schools or has empowered a lot of people, that's no news, to not excite them. But if you say that, for example, 50 houses were destroyed, the government, those kind of news, we draw traffic, especially on the social media, for a period of time, and it will make paper sell. However, nobody will tell your story like you. It's you that owns the story. You are the one that knows that will tell it.
Correct.
Yes, there's an adage from my place that says that if you don't tell your story yourself, the person who will tell your story will tell it from his own lenses that will serve his own interests. So you who owns the story have to tell it like it is, and genuinely, with the purpose of creating a safe space and a safe environment for not just for you and your generation, but for also other people coming. Yes. So we are creating a platform for respect by doing that.
Thank you.
That's what I have to say.
Thank you for that addition. Herizo, you have a question for me, and
yes,
your starting statements. You said you mentioned something like the country is wealthy, but the people are poor. What could be the reason for that? You said the country is wealthy, but the people are poor. Can you let us know why?
Yes, that is quite also the problematic, because according to my research, that's why I tell that it's not anymore a question of politics, nor a question of economics, a question of social, but the question of state of mind, the question of paradigm. Because when you look at the situation here in Madagascar, it's obvious we have gold, we have everything. We have lemurs, we have many things. With all that, we can be a very rich country. But the problem is maybe a problem of governance. But governance is after a fault. When we study economy, we study first the history of fault, of economical fault, but not directly for economy. When we study politics, we study first the story of political fault. That's why in the study, I don't want to take anymore all these politics, economy, and social, but I'd like to focus on cognitive, because the cognition is something that the paradigm can bring.
Yeah.
And if they can bring it through words, through ideas, through terms. So it's much more interesting to talk about cognition management, not only about knowledge management, but about cognition management. And nowadays, there is not only cognition, but there is also metacognition, which is then the reflection onto our cognition. So it becomes much more interesting, because we can study more and more into the mechanism of the cognition. And I'm very happy to find that sometimes there is a dangerous paradigm and there is a secure paradigm.
Yeah, secure paradigm.
So we have to take care. Because, of course, yes, there is interest when you talk about economy. If our culture is weak, there is an opportunity for colonizers to take advantage, because they have beauty, they have bounty, they have techniques, they have technology, they have science. So what can Madagascar have compared to all these? So we have to back down and to follow reluctantly what they give to us. And that's why we are still poor, and nowadays it's very sad to see our country.
I understand that. Thank you very much. And we hope for better leadership, in our countries, and I believe that that change can happen. And if we continue to talk about, do a lot of conferences now is ongoing, and we are doing a lot of you're presenting now. And so it's good we talk more about these things and see to it that change that we are looking for, we are anticipating, we really get that change. So isn't presentations like this, conferences, that we are able to have the opportunity to air our views and make the impact that we are supposed to. Thank you so much, Herizo, for your contribution. And Ibuku, your question, you also have a very interesting topic. I was so much excited when I saw that family thing, it's a very good one. But like you just presented, we have decline in family values. And so we one of the things you mentioned, decline in parental authority. Now, the question is, how can we strike a balance? Because right now, there are a lot of emerging parenting methods and new methods of parenting, best methods of parenting, best way to parent a child. And a lot are happening. A lot of people are studying and researching in parenting. But then, how do we strike that balance with the kids right now? Right now, they are learning a lot of things, right? They
Yes.
see a whole lot happening, yes, on their own. They
Yes.
tell you, sometimes they tend to want to let you know how to parent them, how to do
Yes.
the parenting. Yeah. So in in such situations or scenarios, what will you do to strike a balance? If the if you know how, instead of hitting a child or smacking a child or spanking a child, some parenting methods are like this. They tell you, rather than hitting the child, talk to the child, you know, communicate, dialogue, and all of that. So, and which is also okay. That is good to do. But how do you now balance that? How you don't go to the extreme, they don't go to the extreme. You just strike a balance, come to a middle ground, and get the result that is expected. So, how do you do that?
Yeah, during my generation, my father's words, I grew up in a proper father-mother household in an African setting. And my father's word was law. It was not open for negotiation. It was not, we didn't sit and discuss or reach, whatever he said was fine. He just makes his point and he leaves. And it was done. My mom was also there to act as an enabler, like, what he said is fine. It's not, we are not even having a conversation of whether you agree or not. Your consent is irrelevant. You have to do this. And that's on period. That was towards, I'm talking about at the primary school level and at the teenage level. But when I got to the university, then we sat and reached an agreement. He'll give me choice. He gave me options. And he says, okay, these are the consequences for these options. But you, as an autonomous human being, have a right to make your decisions. At that age, a parent cannot make decisions for the child, because it keeps that child completely dependent on the parent, and it makes that child not to be totally healthy, because there always be seasons in the child's life. The seasons where you have your parents and the seasons when you will not have your parents. So how do you survive? Some
Survive.
people, yeah, some people's life mental health becomes shattered, especially when they lose their parents. They can't survive without their parents. So you give them that structural base from the foundational years. And when you get to the years where they have the capacity to make their choices, especially when they are educated and exposed to knowledge, you give them their options and the consequences of their decisions. And which has also helped me at my personal level, because I noticed that when I lecture, I don't use force. Some lecturers make the mistake of applying force because that's the only method they were familiar with. They use force or threat. No, I don't do that. I give my student options. Come to lectures, submit your assignment as of when due, do this, and you get these consequences. If you don't do this, you will get these consequences. But I don't shout, because it's too much of mental and emotional energy I'm losing. I don't do that. Yes. So when you give them options and you give them consequences, it makes communication and relationship easier, and it makes everybody know their place.
Exactly.
Yes, and it also shields you as a teacher or as as an instructor from emotional manipulation or gaslighting. That's what I've learned in my few years of being a lecturer.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ibuku, and enjoyed that response. And I hope we will continue to learn and to make a difference, like I said, talking to people around us, and get the word out there so that people can hear it and make that change that is expected. So we are rounding up now. We have just few minutes, but then we want to conclude right now. In the absence of any other question, I want to thank every one of you. Ikenna, Herizo, Desoji, and Ibuku. It's nice doing this business with you this morning. So thank you so much.
Thank you
See
so
you
much.
guys.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
I hope to see you
Dr. Kenyami Marichair.
sometime in the future again.
So much,
All right.
thank you.
Bye. All
Bye.
right.
Bye.
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 Okay.
Thank you, everyone.